Okay, so to give you an overview of the topics we'll cover, one very important point is that I think diving and high diving can work together, as Mr. Marculescu said. And also we'll briefly cover the competition format so you can understand the basic rules of high diving. And of course we'll go into more detail about the specific skills relating to the discipline of high diving. And we'll also briefly cover some facilities that we have around the world and the latest changes in regards to the Fina facilities guidelines. Now in Sanya, in the Fina Gala, we put together a video which will demonstrate how diving and high diving can work together, and also the benefits of hosting high diving competitions. Like Mr. Marculescu was saying, we have an incredible opportunity with this portable diving pool, being able to place the pool in front of beautiful and famous backdrops. So please enjoy the video.
The sport of diving and now high diving can shine brightly together. We are taking these sports to greater heights than ever before, and we're not just referring to the height of the platforms. High diving is thrilling the crowds, and we're reaching record highs in terms of TV, print and web-based exposure. Despite a commonly held belief that high divers are daredevils, these athletes are amongst the most disciplined and well-trained in the world. This sport is truly professional, with clear regulations and codes to ensure its place in history. The rules derive from diving, and the skills are performed in a similar fashion, with the exception of landing feet first. Former Olympic divers and Olympic medalists have successfully transitioned to high diving, which demonstrates the high technical standard we're seeing in competitions. Diving and high diving already play a vital role together. These two codes will continue to support each other in a thriving community of international athletes. There are three pathways to consider for the future development of athletes. Firstly, there are junior pathways with feet-first competitions from 10-metre platforms in conjunction with dives from 16 metres. Secondly, there are great opportunities for elite divers transitioning to high diving. Thirdly, the maintenance and development of skills for active high divers. High diving can provide career opportunities and a lifestyle choice which importantly keeps people actively involved in aquatic sports. Hosting high diving competitions can be a new and attractive way to put your federation and your country on the map. This sport makes for exciting viewing for the spectators on site. At one location in France, there was an impressive turnout of 70,000 enthralled spectators. In addition, it provides exhilarating action for the TV audiences. One new and exciting prospect is the portable diving pool, which was used for the very first time at the Fina World Championships in Budapest. And what makes this pool so unique? It gives you the potential to take it to where the crowds are. It can be conveniently placed in front of famous backdrops such as the Eiffel Tower or London Tower Bridge, which of course provides spectacular images. In summary, high diving events can have a tremendous economic effect on your nation. Be sure, diving and high diving is here to stay.
Well, I think that video really demonstrates, I guess, the future potential for the sport. It is obviously quite eye-catching, so it's really drawing to the media right now, and I think Fina's doing a great job with promoting this sport. Now, just a few messages for the diving coaches. Now, to be honest, you already have around about 80% of the knowledge, in my opinion, required to be a high diving coach. So the only things really missing are the lead-ups. You know, what sort of lead-ups do you need to do, and the correct rotational speed. The other fundamental difference is, of course, the entrance. Yes, you guys are diving head first, we're diving feet first, but this is something that we can easily teach you, of course, with patience and with time. So I think there's 3 pathways to consider, yes, junior. In England, we already have junior feet first competitions in Plymouth, like we saw in the video. And there's a young talented diver called Aidan Hislop. So he's currently diving and competing, but at the same time he's also training for high diving. So his eyes are set on the discipline of high diving. Now we can also look at, well, elite divers transitioning to high diving. And I think Gary Hunt, for example, is a great example. And Lindsay used to coach Gary Hunt, and she did a fantastic job with him and gave him an excellent technical background in diving, great aerial awareness, and he has had, let's say, a very successful career. Fina World High Diving Champion, 6 times Red Bull Cliff Diving World Series Champion. Also, if you have high divers in your program already, talk to them. Find ways to perhaps support them with additional equipment, additional coaching support. So it's important to communicate and keep those pathways open. Now, in regards to coaching, I think it's very important we use the expertise of elite diving coaches. We can help improve the technique of the current high divers, and they can also support the high diving coaches. I mean, you guys are up to date with the latest biomechanics, the latest techniques, so help the high diving coaches and vice versa. So the high diving coaches, or perhaps the athletes, can pass on that knowledge to share the information about the lead-ups and any specific techniques relating to the sport of high diving. Now, one component of high diving is trampolining skills. We use a barani. Now, a barani is basically a front somersault with a half twist, so we use that skill and apply it to high diving. So I think if you can draw on the expertise of trampoline coach, perhaps you can run some workshops. I think everybody can learn from this. Okay, really briefly, we'll get into the rules of high diving. So there are 4 dives for the men, 1 easy dive, 1 intermediate dive, I'll explain that shortly, 2 optional dives, 2 difficult dives. So the required dive is here, then there's an intermediate dive sitting in the middle between the required and the optional dives. So for the women, pretty much the same, 4 dives, 2 requireds and 2 optional dives. To break down the rules a little more, the required dive and the intermediate dive are grouped together as 2. Also, the women's 2 required dives are grouped together, and what you have to do is choose from the 5 groups. So it's about takeoff direction. So one can be in a front takeoff, the other one can be a back takeoff, or inward, reverse. You can choose from those 5 groups. In regards to the optional dives, you choose from 10 groups, okay? So forward, back, reverse, inward, and then the twisting groups. So for example, one can be a front 4 somersaults, the other one can be a front takeoff as well. So front 4 somersaults with 1.5 twists, so you choose from the 10 groups. At the moment, to be decided, but we're discussing ways to have a junior format, perhaps an age group bracket of 15 to 17, diving from say 10 to 15 metres, maybe 16, with 3 dives. So 2 required dives and 1 optional dive. We're also considering like a stepping stone bracket. It's not a junior competition, but 18 to 21 years of age. And particularly for the men, making that jump to 27 metres is quite difficult, so important to have that stepping stone of, say, 23 to 24 metres, just to develop that confidence before working your way up to the 27-metre tower. Okay, getting into the details of coaching high diving. So we'll talk about the specific skills. Once again, the Barani, which is taken from the discipline of trampolining, and we'll also talk about how we develop that confidence to go to 20 metres to 27 metres. Of course, we just don't start from ground zero and go to that height. We work our way up in small increments. And then we'll talk about the lead-ups and dive progressions that we have. Okay, so a fundamental part of high diving, once again, is the Barani. With discussions from the trampolining coaches, they were saying that it's best to try and teach the Barani from a C position or a B position. Why? So what they're saying is that it stops the Barani being initiated or starting to twist too early. And when you twist too early, this starts to cause some problems with the entry, and particularly with multiple twisting dives. So I put together a video a couple of years ago which will highlight and demonstrate how the trampoliners will teach the Barani, and also how the Barani is related to the sport of high diving. Well, I think with videos that gives you a much better understanding of how we're applying those sorts of skills to this discipline. Now, a few important points to make is when you are teaching the Barani, if this is your feet, this being your head, it's very important to try and really drive the heels up. And the way to kind of start the twist is to try and use the shoulders and also use the hips in unison. So the idea is to try and get the twist finished early. And just like in normal diving, you need to re-pike. So re-pike early. And a few important observations we made is to make sure you are in the pike position. When you lift your chest, the arms come to the body in unison at the same time. So by observing the athletes that are performing the dives well, we've started to come to these conclusions. Perhaps in the future we may start to adapt and change this, but for now this seems to be working relatively well. So sometimes you'll see the athletes closing the arms early and you'll start to see a bit of over-twisting and some control problems on the entry. Perhaps it's better to be slightly slow, because at the end of the dive it gives you that opportunity to re-pike, to bend. So some of the acrobats and the trampoliners will really stretch the Barani, but you run the risk of, to be honest, over-rotating. And just like in diving, if you land with your arms above your head, maximum score of 4.5. So it's very important to be in control and to have the right rotational speed. Now, Barani out. What is a Barani out? It's basically doing the front somersault with a half twist out of a skill, out of a front 1.5, out of a twist, out of a front 2.5. So that's what a Barani out means. So it's important to practice the Barani on the trampoline. You can also practice the Barani on a 1 meter springboard. Like I was saying, perhaps from a C position or a B position in the beginning to stop the twist being initiated too early. Step by step, teaching the Barani out. One simple way to do it is front 1.5 on the 1 meter springboard. Land over. Use the same takeoff, same rotational speed on the 3 meter springboard. So they do a front 1.5 and then they need to look at the water, then initiate the Barani. Try to get them to think of it like it's two skills. So you don't want them getting confused. Think 1.5, then initiate the twist. So this next video will demonstrate the progressions to learn the Barani out, which is one of the most crucial parts of the sport of high diving. And once you master simple skills, it's quite an obvious statement, but you just work your way up in small, tiny increments to develop the confidence. Now, once again, just to recap, teach it from the C position or B position. It's not the only way to do it, of course. I mean, as diving has evolved, I'm sure we'll evolve with the sport of high diving, and everybody will find their own way to do it. Once again, I want to reinforce the separation of skills. Always think 1.5. Then think about performing the Barani. And the idea of the Barani is that you can keep your eyes on the water during the whole, the last stage leading up to the entry. Of course, you're moving at great speeds and you need to be looking at the water for as long as possible. That's why we use this maneuver from trampoline. Now, blind entries. What's a blind entry? Basically, it's not a Barani. It's doing a front somersault out of the skill. So you're using peripheral vision to adjust. It's much more, well, it's a lot more difficult to land the entry, particularly when performing multiple somersaults and twists. So here's a video example of blind entries.
Wow.
So pretty impressive diving, but I have to give you a word of warning. It is very, very difficult to execute those blind entries, particularly with those multiple somersaulting and twisting dives. When it's 2.5 somersaults, 3 somersaults, very, very easy to over-rotate. However, for the required dives, I think, once again, required dives can be very graceful. This flying front is one of the most beautiful dives, in my opinion, to watch. So, one way to learn how to perform a flying front, for example, from 27 meters, the lead up and the speed is basically a front dive straight from a 10-meter platform. That would be the style of takeoff and the rotational speed. As you fly, about midway, you would enter the tuck position or the pike position. And to control the maneuver, it's important to lead the legs out horizontal, leave the arms out to the side. If they're rotating a little fast, they'll instinctively start to raise the arms to make the radius longer and control the dive. So, look, start with this on 10 meters. Work your way up to 12, to 14, to 16. Take your time with it. But the athlete will instinctively start to understand what to do with their arms just by taking your time to learn this skill. All right. While in diving, we have entry drills from 3 meter, 5 meter, 7 meter, 10 meter. Same principles. Just landing feet first. Sometimes it's just a front jump, a back jump. The athletes are doing running, baranis. They're also using equipment like mini trampolines. And I think that is one of the most useful things you can use in a conventional diving pool to practice the barani out and practice the entry. So here are some examples of many different athletes from around the world, and everyone has their own style, of course, but with the video you'll shortly understand the basics of the entry drills. Well, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, all the different styles of entry. So just to go over some important points for the entry. One is to make sure the arms stay nice and lateral. Once again, reiterating, lifting the chest, arms coming to the body at the same time. And just keep the head neutral on entry. Much like you would stand on a 10-metre platform, keeping the chin in, everything nice and in line. So keeping the arms in a lateral movement for the entry helps. Like head-first entries, of course you want the hands nice and flat to create a rip entry or to create a hole for the body to pass through. So the idea is to keep the feet fairly flat with the heels slightly raised. Most of the athletes are placing their arms more or less somewhere in the front like this. So you can use imitations for entry drills just like you would in conventional diving, practicing this skill over and over to create repetitious movements to remember the skills. So we came to these conclusions once again just by observing the athletes that are consistent and performing well. So we start to use pattern recognition. So once again, of course, the sport will evolve with time and we'll find new techniques, no doubt. Okay, so developing the confidence. We don't go from ground zero to 20 metres or 27. We work our way up slowly to develop the confidence. Most of us come from a diving show background. We would have these high diving ladders with these adjustable platforms so we could move the platform from 10 to 12 to 16 to 18. So we recommend height increments of 2 to 3 metres to slowly work your way up. Now the first dive most athletes try is something simple, 302E. What's an E? It means a 3-position dive. So it's basically a reverse dive pike. That's one position. Second position is straight, and then the tuck position. So a nice simple maneuver to make sure the athlete feels confident. Then another common dive would be front 2 somersaults with a half twist with the Barani out. So nice, simple, easy dives to start with. Here's an example of a reverse 3-position dive, perhaps the most common dive most high diving athletes use in the beginning. Okay, so there's the next section, which is about lead-ups. I mean, what sort of lead-ups do we use? As a general rule of thumb, the men, they'll perform their lead-ups from a 10-metre platform for their optional dives, landing feet first, not head first, and that is to find the correct rotational speed. Some of the lead-ups are done from 7.5 metres, so a reverse 1 somersault with 3.5 twists, in preparation for reverse 2 somersaults with 4 twists from 27 metres. 3-metre springboard is also a beneficial tool to use, particularly with the front twisting, multiple twisting dives. Gary Hunt uses the 3-metre springboard regularly. And once again, we can demonstrate the lead-ups with a video. What we've done is put the lead-up from the lower platforms, and then directly after you'll see the example of the high dive, so you can begin to understand the relationship between the two.
It's a 3.5 pipe out. Oh my god. Oh my god, that's insane.
3, 2, 9. So I think you can appreciate them. I think the athletes now are really pushing the limits. I mean, we're talking about Blake Aldridge doing reverse 4.5 twists and then brining out. I've seen Gary do front triple somersault, 4.5 twists. I mean, and it's kind of interesting the way that they're starting to think about things like separating skills, 2 twists, stopping it, having a look at the water, 1 twist, 2 twists. Like, for me, it's been, to be honest, really exciting. I think they're doing dives I didn't even think they would try to do. So, in some ways, I think they're really, in my opinion, revolutionising the sport. It's absolutely fascinating. And the women as well, I mean, superb what they're achieving at the moment. So, to go over the basic fundamentals, in principle, if you're talking about an optional dive, a difficult dive for the women, the lead up would be a feet first entry from 7 metres, or the other option is a head first entry from 10 metres. An example, if you want to do a back 3 somersaults with 2 twists on a 20 metre tower, the lead up is simple. Back 2.5, 1.5 twist on 10 metre. That is the correct rotational speed to apply to the 20 metre platform. Let's talk about the required dives. Simple example, once again, front double somersault, Barani out. The lead up is head first, front 1.5 from 7 metres, not 10 metres. And that will provide you with the correct rotational speed. So it's very specific. You've got to find the right takeoff for the right dive to make sure the athlete is not under rotating or over rotating. Once again, let's look at a video to show some examples of how to prepare lead-ups. Well, there you have it. So, once again, the videos always demonstrated best, and I think you can now start to appreciate and understand the lead-ups in relation to the high dives. And so, I think it's important, like anything, and like the other lessons we learned from the diving coaches, take your time. Very important to prepare as much as possible, especially with this sport. And of course, the more prepared you are, the more confident the athlete will be. Now, high diving training frequency, this is just a general guideline. Of course, it depends on which time of year you're training at, whether you're leading up into the season. Like all coaches, you need a periodized plan. But generally speaking, your general diving, 5 to 6 days per week. You could also work on entry drills from 15 meters to 20 meters. Let's say 3 to 4 days per week, 5 or 6 dives per session. But from 20 and 27 meters, it takes a lot out of the body. So it's not really advisable to be high diving constantly through the whole year. Once again, have your periodized plan, have your strength block, go back to basics. Perhaps you start to learn new dives again, and around about 2 months before the season starts, you should be starting to perform your high dives to get in tune with the height. In competitions, generally we have 2 to 3 days of training leading up to the competition. I would say a maximum you would see 5 to 6 dives in one training session. But generally speaking, most athletes 2 to 4 dives per session, per day, and then just before the competition, 1 or 2 warm-up dives. So this is not like conventional diving. We can't load the body with the same amount of repetition. So we need to really think carefully and plan your training appropriately, especially for competitions. The psychology, once again, preparation. I can't emphasize that enough. Use all the resources, use all the facilities that you can get your hands on, and be motivating. Be positive with your athlete. You really need to get them prepared, get them psyched up to be energized to face the challenge from these heights. But just try and do your best, like as always, similar principles to diving. Try and keep your athlete mentally balanced, do everything right. Typical injuries, the most common injury is this, the groin. So the legs want to be pulled apart by the impact. Lower back injuries, similar to diving, and I would say the neck as well. Particularly with those blind entries, we're seeing some disc injuries in that region. Great photo to show how that water, it really does want to pull apart. The men seem to be struggling with these kind of injuries more so than the women. Find sport-specific exercises to replicate the entry, holding, squeezing for 2 to 3 seconds. You can see the body tension required upon entry. Strength training, of course, it's important to really focus on the groin exercises, movement-based as well as isometric, and then really try to develop that neck strength. Artem Sulchenko from Russia does a lot of blind entry, so he does a lot of work with that lateral and forward and back motion to stay strong. Once again, keeping your core and back in good physical condition is key. Here's an example of a groin exercise, so you can use a chair, put one leg on it, static or isometric based. Facilities and equipment, so some examples of what other nations are doing. So Vladimir Putin actually met directly with one of the athletes and he pledged to support a high diving program in Russia. In addition, they have a 20-meter platform on the roof in Kazan, and Mitch Geller and his team have also secured a platform on their roof in Montreal, and they're looking to expand to a more comprehensive training facility. This is probably the most, I guess, equipped facility, 3 meters, 5, 7, and 10. But the 10-meter platform, this is pretty special. It has a hydraulic lift which can move from 10 meters up to 20 meters, and that's great for 2 things. Great for the lead-ups to find that specific height the athletes like, and of course those new athletes we want to train so we can really step it up in the right height increments, nice and slow. It also has a fixed 27-meter tower up the top as well, so probably the most comprehensive facility. With the new facility rules with Fina, there is a guideline now which allow outdoor pools or pre-existing pools with a water depth of 5 meters to have towers installed for training or competitions, just to be a bit more flexible so you can use existing pools that you may already have. Once again, like we saw in the videos, the mini tramp is a very beneficial tool for your high diving program. I recommend using this. Also the 2-meter box, so here are the basic dimensions. I think it's important that you have that little 30-centimeter overhang to protrude past the edge of the platform below. And then a little standing surface at the back of the 2-meter platform to stabilise and balance. Okay, we'll skip to this part. We've also included dimensions for platform heights ranging between 10 and 20 meters and 20 and 27, once again to allow those platform heights to have increments to work our way up to the top. Some examples of competition venues. This is Abu Dhabi. We always have a 5, 7 and a 10 and a 2-meter box, and of course the 20 and 27 meter towers. This is Kazan at the World Championships, but I have to say this was one of the most exciting things we've ever seen the portable pool. And the whole idea is this: what can you do with it? You can place it anywhere you want. It could be Times Square in New York. Think about your city. Think about perhaps Red Square in Russia. Downtown in Prague, you can, there we go, Hannah's all happy about that. But imagine the images on TV. You've got the Gothic cathedral in the background, you can see all the spectators gathering around, and the idea is this: to have millions and millions of eyeballs watching the competition on television and on social media, as Melanie was mentioning. So use your imagination. It could be in front of the Eiffel Tower, could be in Dubai. Hey, how about China? How about Shanghai? How about Beijing? So just try to use your imagination of what we could do with these portable diving pools. I think this is a very exciting prospect indeed. And this is the kind of crowds we've drawn in the past. That's 70,000 spectators. So just imagine what we can do with the pool, placed in the right city, the right location. Your world's your oyster. And I say thank you very much indeed, and thanks for listening. And if you've got any questions, I'm here to answer them, of course. Thank you very much.